Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. How do I teach accepting no to a low-functioning 7-year-old? He loves video games. Sometimes he asks appropriately for video games, but it's right before school or therapy. I've been saying good asking, but it's not available right now. He then hits himself, aggresses towards me, and tantrums anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. I have never given him access to video games after this behavior. I don't know what is maintaining it. This has been going on for a month. Please help.
This is such a great question. This has got to be the number one thing that happens with a lot of my adolescents and adults. So the reason that he is, tantruming and hitting himself and aggressing and freaking out when you say no, even though you've been very good and you've been very consistent in regards to not giving him what he wants, the reason that he's doing that is simply he doesn't understand time. So this is a really important concept. If I tell you, let's say you're at work, and I'll say, and you'll say, I really want to go swimming, and I'll say no. And I'll say you can go later. And later means nothing to you. It could be later today, it could be in 20 minutes, it could be in 5 days, it could be a year from now. You will freak out because you have no concept of when you're going to get your reinforcer. There's just no meaning to later. So for him, and this happens all the time with our kids, all the time, because we tell them you can do it after school, you can have it in a couple of hours, you could do it later, all that, and it just, none of it means anything because they're not aware of the passage of time, and they're not aware of, he's not understanding that he can have what he wants at 3 o'clock or at 4 o'clock after school. He's not getting that. If he was able to get that concept, he would have a much, much easier time waiting. And this is true of all of us. Imagine if you went to work and you never knew when work's going to end. I mean, we work because we know at a certain hour, 5, 6, whatever it is, we get to go home and rest. If you were told just keep going, it would drive you crazy. You'd be freaking out. So the important thing is to try to teach him some concepts of time. There's many different ways you could do that. You can, use a timer if it's a short period of time, such as just an egg timer or a kitchen timer or something like that. You could put a timer on an iPad, obviously, which counts down from, let's say, 3 o'clock. There's many apps right now that actually help you time to a certain point. So in other words, you could plug into the application 4 p.m. and it'll show the person the progression of time till 4 p.m. by for instance, with a bar that gradually fills in. You need to have a visual that shows him you're getting closer, and you have to teach this. So, ideally, let's say in a given scenario, you would practice this not in the morning when he's about to go to school. So you'd practice this separately, and you'd prompt him. What was the item that he wants?
Video games.
Yeah. So you show him the video game and say, do you want it? And he'll say, yes, I want video game or whatever, and you give it to him. Then you practice, do you want it? And then you set a timer or the timer on the thing, and you'll say you get it when the timer is over 5 minutes or even 1 minute. You can start with anything. And as he's sitting there, you'll just keep talking to him, keep him occupied, and show him, say, look, we're almost there. Look, we're almost there. And he gets the concept that when this visual thing, whether it's a egg timer or a kitchen timer or something on an iPad, a stopwatch, whatever it is, when that hits a certain point and it dings is when he gets it. And then you gradually shift that and increase it to an hour. Once you've hit an hour, you can pretty much skip forward faster. You can go to 2 hours, 3 hours, and so on. And you can also tie it into, give him a schedule for school. Like, say, this is what happens in the morning, a visual schedule. Then you get lunch, and, put a picture of him having lunch. Then you get in the car. Then you come home. Then you can have video games. And give him visual pictures, because that'll help him understand he's getting closer. He'll check off, this is what happened. I had my class. I did my lunch. I'm in the car. I'm getting close to home, I'm going to get my video game. So those are some ideas of how to do this, but it is very important to help the individual understand. It's the most critical thing. When I'm able to do that with my kids, with my adolescents, really severely affected adolescents or adults, all their behavior just goes away. Because you're fair, you're explaining to them that they can certainly have what they're asking for, just not now.
Yeah. Here's the irony in what you're saying is that I feel like as the parents, we want the child to stop doing this now.
Yeah.
And you're telling us we have to wait. We have to do these steps before they stop doing it. It's the same thing.
Exactly right.
It's striking me because I'm thinking, but if I were this parent, I'm like, that's going to take a while to work up to, and I want it to stop now. And that frustration that we're feeling is the same frustration they're feeling.
That's right. And this is a very good lesson for all the viewers in that you never really, when something is a problem, you don't want to work on it during the course of life. Like, you cannot work on this issue when you're trying to get him ready for school in the morning. That's the worst time. You have enough on your plate at that time. He's going to lose it. You're going to, everything's going to fall apart. You need to make this a target, and you work on it actually after school. Right. You work on it on the weekends. You work on it when you actually have the time to give him some duration of time, attention, and teach him how to shape up the behavior.
And so in the interim, while she's shaping this up, and he's still possibly having the tantrum in the morning, what can we tell her to help her to get through that period of time?
Well, you will really at this point, as soon as you start getting into it, tantrums will start to go down a little bit.
Okay.
But redirect. All you can do right now is distract him with other things. Yeah. I would keep the computer away. I would definitely make sure the computer is not visible in the morning so that it's not a prompt. I would keep him busy from the minute he wakes up to the minute he has to go to school, both verbally talking to him, keeping his mind occupied with various things, increase reinforcers, other types of reinforcers, so that he is not necessarily needing the computer. Don't give, in other words, you're doing some antecedent control here. You're not even giving him the opportunity to start thinking about the computer and ask for it, or videos, or whatever it is. Okay. Use video games. And the other thing is you can always make him have a habit, teach him the habit of video games are from like 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and that's it. Yeah. And that's also very easy. We're very habit-controlled beings, a species altogether. So you just have to start teaching him time. And I swear to you, it'll change a million things in his life. Okay. The simplest thing you can do is get him a very inexpensive, like a Casio type watch that's digital, and teach him how to read numbers. Hopefully he knows how to read numbers. Most of our kids do, or adults do, and you just simply tell him when that hits 6. Yeah. And then you turn on the timer and it'll beep at 7 and it's over. Yeah. So you give him a visual means of understanding time.
Yeah. And I love the fact that we're so high tech now, but even if you needed to go low tech, I remember years ago a mom that she was having difficulty getting her kids to go out to the bus at a certain time. And she just kept yelling at them, saying, we gotta go, and they kept missing the bus. So she made a clock. She had the kitchen clock there, old-fashioned analog kitchen clock, and then she made a clock with a face, and she drew the time of when they had to be out the door. And just that visual changed the whole morning.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't have to be high-tech, but there are so many, if you've got a smartphone, there's so many high-tech things you can do that you don't have to get out the arts and crafts supplies.
Absolutely, yeah.
But great advice, because that's a difficult...
It's a very tough one, yeah.
It is a tough one. Okay, so... all right, this is another great one. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. My 21-month-old just got assessed by CARD, and they use the ADOS. They told me he is on the borderline. Now, what's the difference between DSM-V and ADOS? And when do you use one or the other? Thanks.
So that's probably a question that a lot of people have. The DSM-5, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, has a section, it has a chapter on autism, or now in the DSM-5 it's called Autism Spectrum Disorder. And it kind of has a series of symptoms. It defines autism. So basically it says if your child has this, and this, then you'll get a diagnosis of autism. And, the symptom criteria are, you have to have a bunch of symptoms in the area of social communication, or, social behavior and such. And then you have to have a couple of symptoms in the area of stereotypy or ritualistic stereotype behaviors or repetitive behaviors. And if you have enough of all of those, then you'll get a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And the DSM also now gives you the ability to say with or without intellectual disability, which means mental retardation, with or without language impairment, obviously, based on medical, like connected to some other medical issue, connected to some other environmental issue, all these other sort of modifiers. And it also allows you to say how much support you feel the child needs. So in the social communication, if the child has a lot of real severe social issues, then I would rate it a 3, which is sort of needs significant support, versus a child who has few social problems, in which case they would just need some support. And the same thing with the ritualistic behavior. So it's sort of, here's a bunch of symptoms. Does your child fit all of these? Yes or no? Okay, and that's the traditional, that a clinician who is trained in autism, like I am, uses the diagnostic manual to diagnose autism, okay, to diagnose anything. The book is all of the mental disorders that exist and describes each one. And so then you look at a child and you look if their symptoms match these, and you decide as a clinician, yes or no. And it's, although it's pretty objective, it's subjective too. So for instance, it'll say, does the child have appropriate social interaction with peers? Well, that's a subjective issue. If I'm a clinician who doesn't know what other 3-year-olds should be doing in their interactions, then I won't really know how to answer that. I might be contrasting it to a child who's very advanced or a child who's very delayed, and then my answer would be incorrect, right? So I have to know what it means when I say appropriate social behavior, and then see if this child fits in or not, and see how far off I feel the child is. So there's a subjectivity to it. The ADOS is a test that was designed to measure whether or not the child fits these criteria. Okay. So the ADOS is very different. It's all tests. There are actually some questionnaires, but most tests that are standardized tests don't directly come and ask you or ask the child, does the child give eye contact, for instance? Right. Does the child have normal language? You don't come and ask those things, because if you ask those things, your validity is gone pretty much, because the individual answering on behalf of the child will most likely be biased. Right. So if it's a parent, the parent might be very, very, very worried and therefore cover up some of the things that they're seeing, or really want to get the diagnosis and therefore embellish some of the things. It's not a real, or the parent might be very scared, and that would influence how they respond, or the parent might be very depressed, and that'll influence how they respond. So it's not a valid measurement, really, when you do a parent questionnaire. Some are, but it's very rare. With the ADOS, it's an administration standardized test, so it's a series of things. For instance, you will have the child play with a particular toys, and you'll see how the child plays. And as for instance, you'll model something and put it down, and the child is supposed to pick that up and do the same kind of thing. And if the child does, you'll realize the child is paying attention to what you're doing. They're reading the intention of what you wanted them to do, and they're doing it. Or you'll play with something in a manner, and you'll see the child what they do, and then you'll identify whether the child is able to do pretend play. Or you'll do another activity and you'll identify whether the child is able to problem solve. All tests are like that. So like IQ tests are like that. The ADOS is like that. And once you've done, and this is actually the ADOS 2, by the way, because it's been modified to fit DSM-5. So once you do that, once you are able to administer all these items, then based on, so it's kind of a backwards way. You're not really looking at the individual symptoms of autism, but you're looking at all the things that are measured in the ADOS, and then those actually go to score these items on the DSM. So for instance, let's say, let me join them for you. Let's say on the DSM, one symptom would be, does the child exhibit repetitive behaviors like lining up objects, turning the lights on and off, etc., etc. The ADOS is a way that within a set period of time, you will make sure to observe whether the child does that or not.
So you're creating an environment in which you might see these things.
Exactly. Okay. You're interacting with the child for 1 or 2 hours. You're putting a bunch of stuff in front of the child. If he suddenly starts to line his objects up, or if he starts to take a car and just go back and forth with it repeatedly, or looks out of, any of those situations, it'll give you more of a possibility of observing the answer to that rather than just asking a parent.
Okay. That makes a certain amount of sense, because I think a lot of us have sat in the room while they've done, and we've all walked out and been furious and
like,
said,
what the hell was that?
Well, and then when the doctor says, well, here's the reason why. I remember being mad because, and I've heard so many other parents say this too, it's sort of the typical thing that we say, that there's the box of toys, and I've had this done several times now with my child, and they get out the box of toys, and there's always the teapot and the little teacups, and we don't drink coffee in my household, and we don't have a teapot, and I was like, well, if you're going to say he has autism because he didn't know what to do with a teapot, I was mad about it.
Right.
And they talked about a cookie, and we didn't allow him to have sugar, so he didn't know what a cookie was, and I was like, you picked a reference that he doesn't understand.
Yes.
And that's just me being in denial.
Well, it's not necessarily, and that's a very important factor that you're bringing in. So in IQ tests across the board, they're very similar, like the Wechsler, the WIPSI, the WISC, and so on, and the Stanford-Binet. They're all very similar. They come with these massive boxes. Well, you say box, they're bigger than a suitcase, really, of items.
Yeah.
And they're extremely expensive tests as well. And they change all the time. And part of the reason they change is because of these validity issues. So over the years, they realized, for instance, that the Stanford-Binet in the old days that was being administered was not valid, for instance, for African American kids, because they would have completely exposure to different items.
Yeah.
And the language in it wasn't what they were familiar with.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the reasons that schools are not allowed to administer IQ tests, because they are much broader facilities and they're all over the country, and they're in certain regions these tests are not valid.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that's very important, actually, and should be considered. But you still, because it's a standardized measure, you have to have a specific object, because what you're doing is you're contrasting his response on the teapot to thousands of other kids.
Right.
And there's the only way you can actually get a standard score for a given child is to look at those normative tables, which are thousands of other kids' responses.
Right.
So, the assumption is in those thousands of other kids, there's going to be other kids that are also not exposed.
That didn't know what a teapot was, but still were inquisitive enough to try to figure it out.
It's always, it's interesting you say that. You don't need to know what a teapot is. When something has a spout, you automatically know what to do with it.
But I was floating on a river in Egypt. I was on denial, and I didn't want it to be, So, but parents do get angry.
Absolutely.
We go in for that 2 hour, and we're like, how can you tell? And maybe he was having a good day, or maybe he was having a bad day. So that enlightens me about you're just setting up an environment in which you can efficiently look at things and get an idea.
And get an idea that you can then contrast to exactly the same scenario that 1,000 other kids were in.
Okay,
that's the whole
important.
concept.
Yeah.
So then it takes away the subjectivity.
Right.
So if I'm a clinician, that I've seen thousands of kids, so I pretty much I'm standard. I can look at someone in 15 minutes or so. I can tell where they are, what their diagnosis is, how far along they are, and so on. But if someone's brand new to the process, they really do have to follow these procedures and actually look up in the book and see, okay, this is a standard score of 36 and it's too low and whatever. So you have to be able to objectively contrast to other kids. That's the most important portion of standard tests. And it's a difficult process. Parents get upset. They have every right to get upset. There's a million reasons. I would lose it if I was an autism mom. I would completely lose it 24/7. Can you imagine? Because, I lose it, and I'm on behalf of all autism moms, right? Because, it's really ridiculous that I don't want to say a number, but there's a lot of professionals who really don't know what they're doing or what they're talking about, which is why I lose it on them. And I can't even imagine if they were the ones guiding me what to do with my child. I'd kill them. You know, it's terrible.
It's frustrating. And you don't know what the person's credentials are walking into the office.
It doesn't matter. Their credentials could be the top credentials in the universe.
Right.
You know, graduated from Harvard and this and that and the other thing, and they still wouldn't know what they're telling you to do is wrong. There's a very huge disconnect out there in regards to the actual practice of what to do with kids with autism. It's just, and there's a huge disconnect because a lot of professionals still feel that our kids this is lifelong, they're never going to improve. The medical field has not accepted that things do better if you join in with the behavioral field.
Yeah.
Neither has the behavioral field. We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's still all these disconnections out there with professionals fighting and saying ridiculous things to parents is annoying. I can understand parents getting upset.
It is frustrating. But I think part of it is that we just haven't always understood. One of the times that my child was evaluated, and it was by a funding source, and I sat with my husband for 2 hours in a room, and what the guy did was he would try different things, and my son wouldn't participate, and then he would take and he would blow up a balloon and he would let it go around the room. And we did this for 2 hours. And we walked out and my husband said, are they paying that guy? Because but looking back on it with what I know now, he wasn't saying anything, but he would blow the balloon and he would let it fly around the room, let it go. But he was watching my son to see what reaction. Does. And, but at the time, my husband was like, seriously, they need to take him off the payroll. That man is not doing his job. And he's going to write a report. I think sometimes we don't understand what's the method is. So,
well, yeah, and the clinician in charge should really be explaining things a little bit better to the parents as well. Obviously, it's not your
nice.
Your child is not a guinea pig.
But this is why people need to come and see you, because you do it right and you explain it to people. A lot of times you're sitting there and they will say, you ask a question, they're like, I'm evaluating the child, don't talk.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They don't, the parents aren't a part of it for them. But that's why we talked to Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Yes. That's why you are a visionary. That's why we thank you so much for being here. And on that note, we should give you a break. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back with more questions from you for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she is answering your questions. And I want to get right into another one. Hi, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. My son is 3.5 years old, and he's been with CARD for 6 months. I decided to get him 40 hours of ABA and hold off on what the school had offered, which was an autism class 3 hours a day for 5 days. My question is ABA going to catch him up on all aspects of behavior and education to when he goes to school he will survive? His twin sister is attending a preschool, and I know not to compare the two, but she's learning a lot of things that he's not. So I'm afraid that he, as he is learning most things, which, by the way, he masters all of his goals really fast, but hardly generalizing any of it, he will be falling behind in a lot of other things, and we're back to square one. Dr. Jonathan always says 40 hours of ABA is most effective for young kids. Please explain to me how ABA will catch him up. And she says, love you guys. We love you back. We
do love you back. We totally love you back. You're the type of parent that really makes a big difference. So, and it's 3, right? The child's 3?
3.5.
Yeah, so don't worry right now. I can understand you're worried. First of all, girls are always slightly ahead of boys in that age range. So it's a bad situation to compare to a sibling, so don't do that. But here's how it goes. You focus initially, you only have 40 hours. I mean, ideally we should have 60 or 70 hours, but with 40 hours, you focus on the things that are the most delayed and the most important to begin with. So what they should be focusing on is language development right now, and unless he's delayed in motor, at which point they would go back to that. Adaptive, obviously, is going to, like potty training, things like that have to be in place as well at 3.5. And it's going to be a lot of language. And then it's going to start going into play social, cognition, executive functioning, and all these areas, and they all have their own activities and lessons. The way that you catch up is just like tutoring. So if you think of a child who's fallen behind, I'm jumping ahead. We will teach him academic, don't worry. We will teach him more advanced things that his sibling is probably getting right now, don't worry. We will teach him everything he needs in order to be able to do well in the environment. And we will also teach him how to learn rapidly from looking and observing, so that he'll learn much more rapidly. But in the first year of treatment, also in the first and second year, you really are doing a lot of more, especially in the first year, much more sort of discrete trial type of intervention. And you're not focusing as much on generalization. There is some generalization, but it is much more just rapid learning. And you can learn a lot faster with a standard protocol like discrete trial, like sitting down and presenting stimuli to someone, than walking around in the environment. It's just faster, that's all. Mm-hmm. Once he's mastered those things, though, your supervisor should, anything that he masters in the discrete trial format should then be generalized to the environment while you move on to a new discrete trial thing. So discrete trial is kind of like the introduction, and everything pops into a maintenance and generalization log while you're still teaching ongoing concepts, because there's a billion concepts that have to be taught. If that isn't happening, or if you're ever concerned about whether or not your child is getting the right type of oversight and supervision, all you have to do is call the clinical director of CARD, Evelyn Kung, and she'll set up an evaluation of your whole program. I mean, right now we have a ton of people doing the evaluations. So we have all of our TAS group, which is our analytics group. Really, they're the ones that analyze the data. They look at every child's skills, and they're constantly evaluating whether the programs are right, the behavior interventions are right, and they do overlaps with the families, with the supervisors, with the staff, etc. All of ARG, our Autism Research Group, Dr. Jonathan's group, they all observe the behavioral interventions, and they go in and train the staff. Vince Redmond, who's been on this show many times, Vince, for instance, will deal with all other parent training issues and train you to a point where you become sort of like a supervisor, and you learn everything in the course of the time that you're here. There's a massive amount of that sort of stuff happening. And so don't worry, I'm pretty sure that you're getting oversight, especially right now. I mean, I implemented this at the beginning of this year, and there's I would say 20% of every case is just pure supervision from senior staff over the case. So don't worry, it's a lot of supervision. Having said that, the trajectory is just like tutoring. Let's say a child falls down on math or something, and you tutor them, and they're rapidly learning faster than their peers, so they eventually catch up. And when you look at our kids, they have a trajectory that before intervention was sort of flat, so of acquisition, right? So they weren't learning as rapidly. Maybe he lost 2 years, 3 years of learning. Learning is usually a trajectory like this. So in other words, when time goes by, we keep learning. So you learn how much you learn and how much time goes by, and it goes up evenly. With our kids, it has flattened out. Now what we do with this intervention is we're starting to make that angle shift a little bit. So the typical 3-year-old, let's say a typical 2-year-old is going like this, and our kid was like this before. Now they're beginning to start joining, and eventually by 5 or so, they'll hit the same line. So that maybe by 5 or 6, depending on how rapidly he's learning, the two lines meet. He will now join back the rate of learning that he should have had all along, and then we sort of fade off and let him go. So that's kind of the process. And, feel free to try to get on my calendar. I always tell people this. I book far out, like 6 months to a year out, but I still love seeing our kids and kind of just checking in with the supervisors and doing a quick review of the program, and then letting the parents know what you're looking at going forward. You should also ask your supervisor at the next clinic to show you skills. It annoys me sometimes that I keep repeating this, but supervisors should be reviewing skills profiles with the parents, and that really will give you a kind of an idea of where you're going.
And we get these kinds of questions from parents in this first year of intensive behavioral intervention a lot. And there's a special place in my heart for all of you because I so painfully remember that first year.
Yeah, it's hard.
That period of time of, finding out I got to get the ABA, fighting to get the ABA, jumping through all the hoops for it to start, and then feeling like, okay, I don't understand what you guys are doing. You told me you were going to catch him up. When is that happening? How is that going to gel? You're working on these little things. I don't see him incorporating that. How is this going to work? And getting myself into a dither.
Yeah,
pacing the floor and going, when is this all going to make sense? And I was saying to somebody the other day, I only got to have one pregnancy that led to a baby. Mm-hmm. I had one miscarriage and one that led to Jem. And I so wished I could do that again so that I could enjoy it. Yeah. Because I couldn't. I was too nervous the whole time I was pregnant about what's going to happen. Is it going to be okay because of the miscarriage? And I love watching the A Word because I get to go back and enjoy the process and know what the outcome is because you don't know how it all gels. And for me, I now know how it all gels. So I'd love to go back and enjoy each one of those victories that my child had.
That's so true. And the A Word is spectacular simply because of that, because it shows you everything, and you can just sit in a week and watch a couple of years of progress. But what it is a really good point, which is why I just recently asked Vince this week and last week to start calling every parent when they first start and spending a couple of hours with them on the phone explaining to them how this is going to progress. Yeah. And that's just a very important thing.
It is. And know that I think it's normal that you're feeling all the things that you're feeling, but it is amazing when you get to the 1 year mark and you look back at all the things. But there will come a time when and each child is different, and I guess it comes together in a different way and at a different time. But all of a sudden they get it, and I think always of that Annie Sullivan, Helen Keller moment where she did all those things to get her to understand one word, and then once she understood one word, then Helen understood how to learn and it all exploded. Yes, I think our kids are a lot the same way. Yeah. Once they finally get it, it's amazing.
It's so fast. It's so rapid. It is. Some of my kids that are just like they have absolutely no vocalization, and then you pair their vocalization through AMAND training. Mm-hmm. You kind of pair a vocalization, let's say a sound, with an object that they really like. The instance they get that, then all sounds become meaningful.
Yeah, it's like all the barriers come down, and it's crazy good. And I'm longing for that for you, and can't wait till you have that moment and you see it. But hang in there, you're doing a great job. We're going to take another break and come back with more questions for Dr. Granpeesheh. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh with us, and she's a true visionary in the field of autism. It's such a joy and a treat for her to be here, and she's answering your questions. We had a question come in on the live feature for Dr. Doreen. I am a skills user as a parent with my 5-year-old son, and I want, all in capital letters, this awesome RBT certification. It is at the top of my to-do list. I've already started my 40 hours of training with IBT. My question is CARD IBT doing anything about people having access to steps after the 40-hour training? To my understanding from watching a previous episode of Autism Live, once I do my 40 hours, I have to be given a competency test. Can CARD give me that test via a live chat? Then after I'm certified for a year, 5% of my therapy must be certified by a BCBA. Can I pay CARD for the supervised hours with my son as a skills user once I'm certified? I'm determined to do this, but without help after my 40 hours, it sounds like I can't. I already started my 40 hours of training with IBT. Please help me understand what to do next. So sad and confused. Thank you in advance. Well, I hear you saying you're sad and confused, but I think you're a warrior mom.
Yeah, absolutely. No, not at all. Don't be sad or confused at all. The RBT, the test itself, I think, is being administered through, if I'm not wrong, if they haven't done it yet, the BACB. but it's an online thing that should be pretty easy to do. Everything else we can do.
Yep.
Like we can continue your training, we can give you the CE, we can give you the mentorship, the supervision, everything we IBT. So no, you're not at all abandoned. It's not past the just, you know, and feel free to please talk to Catherine Peters at IBT or anyone at IBT and they'll help you through this. RBT, Registered Behavior Technician, is a brand new concept that the Behavior Analysis Certification Board has come up with. And it's a very, very minimal amount of training, which is sort of less than what we do with our junior therapists, but it does involve some practical training, which is very, very good. And up till now, we've been doing it for 100 years, but no one else has ever done real practical training with the junior therapist level. So to hear from Shannon and from you that parents are interested in it would have never occurred to me, because parents are so overwhelmed and busy and have so much on their plate. But it delights me because we're currently running a lot of research showing the impact of really well-trained parents and how different it is when the parent is very, very well-trained. Now, I don't think RBT is enough, to be honest with you, because RBT, again, is not autism specific. RBT is just teaching you behavioral techniques, which is spectacular, and you need to have all of that. But where does IBT, we've started to do this now, IBT will actually give you an additional certificate if you go through their program, where it'll not only be sufficient for RBT, it'll be above and beyond, and it'll train you more for autism and for what to do with your child. It's much more practical. It's not theoretical. It's a practical training. And so, yes, you should absolutely do that. And, you know, I encourage you, and don't be sad or confused. We will hold your hand through this. We're very proud of parents who are willing to do something like that.
I love it. And I think part of, you know, I was saying this the other day when we had Cecilia Knight with us on the show, training is always something that's wonderful, and parents always want information. But if we can be killing three birds with one stone, I think that's when we get extra motivated and excited. If I can be the best possible trained parent to be with my child, that's a plus for me, right? But if I have a certification that says not only do I know I'm trained, but I can say to somebody, here's the designation, I'm an RBT certified, then when I go to the IEP, I have more, you know, they know now that I know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Too.
In fact,
right? It's
That's right. And we'll make it so that you can actually, so our certificate will probably be skills certification. So you could be RBT and skills certified, and you'll be way above the field.
There you go. And then I think a lot of parents are saying, hey, if I have to learn this anyway, because I need to learn this for my child, let it be useful. Let me be able to use it for another child. A lot of people are saying, look, if this is going to be my career anyway, then let's make this my career.
Right.
And why not? Why not be smart about it? Because everybody has to keep a roof over the head too.
Absolutely. And in fact, some parents, as you know, Shannon, have actually gone forward and gotten their BCBA and have started practices, and they work very effectively with us as affiliates. I mean, really fabulous parents, you know, who've made a huge difference not only in their own child's life, but multiple other kids as well, which is amazing. So yes, all these opportunities exist. What I've been trying to learn and understand from parents is realistically their commitment and their time availability. You know, my life, I don't have children with autism, but I work very hard, you know, so I leave here. Last night I left here at 7:30, but I leave the office probably somewhere closer to 6 every day. When I get home, I am just cooking, and I cook and I take care of the kids, and I talk to them about their homework and make sure they've done what they're supposed to do. And like honestly, and I spend time with them, my three children, and before I sit down, it's past 9 o'clock. And then at that point, and I, you know, try to keep my own health, and so therefore I want a half an hour of working out or whatever it is. And so really when I sit down, it is 9 o'clock, and which is probably the reason I don't sleep until 12, because I want 3 hours of looking at my phone and emails and whatever else. But the issue is, when do you find time? If I was to hear now, but you know, of course we do everything for our kids, we really do, and it is extremely empowering when you learn this stuff, because then nothing ever scares you, and you always know how to deal with situations. Like, you know, that is the biggest thing, of course, is it empowers you. But realistically, I would love to hear from the parents who are our viewers, like, what is your capacity? How much can you handle? Because if you can handle it, I have it. Like, I'll give you as much training as you want. I mean, IBT itself has hundreds of hours of training. And do you want it live? Do you want it webcam? Will you go to a class? Will you get online? Do you want it to be an e-learning format? Do you want to have the ability to talk to someone? Like, how do you want it to be, practicum, so that you actually experience with another child? What's reality for you?
Yeah. And I would love it if people wrote in and said, and I think you're going to get a wide variety of responses, but I will tell you that I think that being able to be flexible and have this e-learning so that you can do it at 2 o'clock in the morning if you need to, or do it on that Saturday afternoon when you've got somebody who can help you, that's really key. I wished we'd had that in my early days.
Right.
I would have been all over that like white on rice.
And what can we do to improve that? Like, maybe we can include more video, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I mean and I think people should write in and say what they want to hear. But I do love the idea that there's another certification, because what a lot of parents are trying to do is try to figure out, how do I work and take care of my child? And if there's something that solves both of those things,
right.
or is setting you up for work someplace down the road, and we all know that autism isn't going away, the incidence has gone up, that we don't need a few foot soldiers, we need an army.
Right.
And if there's a way that we can be productive at both those things at the same time, I'm speaking for myself here, but I would have done that right away. And there was a moment when I considered being a BCBA, but the amount of schooling that you had to do then to be away from home, I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So I'm here.
Got it. No, I hear you. I completely get it. Of course.
But I think, and I'm hearing from parents, and I loved this question because I thought, I understand that. If I'm going to get the training anyway, let me get the certification so it serves me in another way.
Absolutely. And what we're doing, that's specifically why our credential prepares you for RBT, gets you the RBT credential, and then gives you a couple of more areas. Because I think that's also what we do for RBCBAs. If you think about it, all of our RBCBAs who come to CARD, we give them another 6 months of training.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that is because we feel, not to be insulting to the BCBA credential, it's a very good credential, but it's not autism specific. And so what we do is we tag on. And the same thing with RBT, we are tagging on very, very specific additional training that's not required, but it will get you through, and in about the same amount of time, you'll know more. So.
Great stuff. Now, we've had 3 different questions come in about IEPs.
Okay.
One who's wanting to know, first IEP is coming up, daughter just diagnosed, has no words. Another person says, I need help writing goals and objectives for my son's IEP on April 29th. It's the first one that I will be present for since his diagnosis. And I want to be prepared and would appreciate assistance or guidance in this area. My son is 4.5.
Got it.
That's from a dad that wrote in. We love it when our dads write in. And then there was another one saying, how involved should I be at the IEP as a parent? How much?
Great. We'll hit all of those.
Yeah.
So you need to be very involved in the IEP. In other words, don't be shy and don't step back. This is your child. You get to make the canvas. And by law, you have the right to make that canvas. So it's your right. Here's what I would do. You don't have a lot of time. First thing is, I want to make sure you know your rights and your child's rights. So I would go online and I would Google, what are my rights during an IEP? And it's standard documentation that you can download from the Department of Education. It's just easier if you Google it. And then you can print it out and read that. It's like a 2-page thing, and it'll tell you everything. You don't have to sign the IEP. You just have to say you were present. If you disagree, you can have the right to. There's all these things you should know. Second thing is, I would immediately get on skills. This is the fastest way I can help you right now, is get on skills, skillsforautism.com. Skillsforautism.com, either a 4 or FOR, it doesn't matter. get on there, answer the index for your child, plug your child's name in, your date of birth, etc., and answer all the questions. This will take you time. It takes about an hour per year of age. So depending on how old your child is, you'll have that much time just to answer the questions.
It's worth it, though. It's such a great investment in your child and in your relationship with your child.
Absolutely.
Really incredible.
And once you answer those questions, you will then get a treatment plan. It'll tell you the things that you have to teach. And you can go in there and you can select the more basic ones. So what I would do is think, if your child's, I think, let's say 3, you're looking at, this is the child who's supposed to receive a 40-hour program. And I'm writing up a paper I've mentioned a few times on the standards, but generally as I'm writing it, I'm noticing pretty much if your child's between 3 and 6, you should be getting a full program. So, or 2 and anything below 6. So you should really start and pick programs assuming that you're doing a 40-hour program. 40-hour program means, sometimes people ask about this. So what that means is that in a given week, your child's receiving approximately 40 hours of direct one-to-one ABA intervention. So that means, let's say it's Monday morning, and so 40, let's try to divide it by 6. So it's approximately 6 to 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. You want to give you 1 day of family time. You don't need it. This is awesome, but then divide it by 7. Like, try to go across the entire week. Mm-hmm. So you'll be doing, let's say, 6 hours a day, and in that 6-hour time frame, that means you will have 3 sessions of 2 hours each, or 2 sessions of 3 hours each, depending on how your child can handle things and what age and so on. When you have a 2-hour session, so let's say you'll go 8 to 10, you'll have a little break, 12 to 2, a little break, and then 3 to 5, whatever, something like that, or spread it out even more. When you have those sessions, the session itself is broken down multiple times. So every 3 minutes or 1 to 3 minutes, your child gets a small 1 or 2 minute break. So it sounds like a lot, but it's a lot of playfulness and a lot of reward and a lot of teaching. That's how the session is. So now, based on that amount of time, you want to pick your lessons. Your lessons will depend on the areas of deficit. So when you look at, I have to do this. This is one of the things on skills recommendations. I have to fix this so parents understand this whole process better. Which is essentially, if my child is, let's say, the typical type of I don't want to say typical, but the type of child that I see the most, let's say, that child will have very severe delays in social and language, most likely. So I would be focusing on those domains if it's a 3-year-old. So I'd want to have, let's say, the overall that you want to have is somewhere around 20-25 programs. So I'd probably have about 4 or 5 language lessons, maybe 2 or 3 in social, maybe 1 or 2 in play, depending on the child's age, 1 or 2 in adaptive. If the child's already at the level where I can put in some executive functioning, I will, as well as cognition, maybe 1 cognition, and then some motor if the child has motor. Probably not doing much academic until the child's after 5 or 4.5, 5. So that's sort of the mishmash of things, and then I pick the ones that are the most severely delayed because there's going to be prerequisites to other stuff.
Right.
And once I've picked those, I go into those particular lessons. So I put those in my treatment plan and skills. I go into that lesson, and there you have your objective. Your IEP goal is written in there. Yeah. So, for instance, let's say I will pick, I want to teach the child, prepositions, just as a basic language lesson, or I want to teach the child, brushing their teeth as an adaptive, or I want to teach the child kicking a ball as a motor, or, whatever it may be. Once I pick those and put them in my little shopping cart of this is his current treatment plan, and I go to each lesson, prepositions, there will be 4 prepositions, several IEP goals, from the most basic to the most advanced. The most basic might be, put on top. So you're teaching the child to put an object on top of another, next to it, behind it, under it, and so on, receptively. That'll have an IEP goal written in there. Or the most advanced, perhaps, would be, where is the blue pen? And then the child is supposed to say the blue pen is on top of the yellow notepad. Whatever. I mean, it can get much more advanced. So, but every form of prepositions will have an IEP report goal. So you just take those IEP goals and put them together, and that's your IEP report. We are right now I just saw from this director of skills yesterday, sent me an email. She's pushing forward on for skills to just generate automatically your IEP report for you,
amazing.
Which will be coming out now soon, right after I get skills book out, which is a little bit more important. But you can do that very easily now, and that will really help you. And yeah, be involved in your IEP and tell them, show them that you know what you're talking about.
2 years ago, I've been to so many IEP meetings now, and 2 years ago I went in with goals from skills.
Yeah.
And I went in with the confidence of knowing these are age appropriate, these are skill appropriate for my child, these are exactly what he needs, and I have them in the language. And it was a game changer. It was a total game changer. And it was a stress-free IEP. I was well slept. I was actually prepared instead of being as prepared as I thought I could be. And my child's program changed as a result of having those skills IEP goals. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to do everything that Dr. Granpeesheh just said. And by the way, if you go to skillsforautism.com, you can get a 14-day free trial of skills and do it. I mean, you've got an IEP coming up on the 29th. The one parent who wrote in, you've got time to do this by then. So I encourage you to do that.